Good morning, all of you. Good morning. Right, we are beginning with yesterday's question paper and examination. Some of us have appeared in examination and some of us have not. If we have gone through the question paper, my observation about question paper is its difficulty level is slightly at lesser degree than what was there in previous examination. There were complete absence of, there was total absence of any unknown term as was highlighted in the last examination, paved theory, periglacial topography. We never had any such terms as shocking terms in examination. But in section B of paper 1, it was all geographical thought. One way or the other, it was all geographical thought. And in such type of questions, how to segregate. Because if I don't want to go random, but if I just ask you to take question on David Smith's welfare approach, then the question including the term social well-being, and then there is the question which is asking us to talk about welfare approach in geography is about territorial equity and etc. and there is a question which is talking about since the 1970s Marxist viewpoint. Marxist viewpoint when it comes to the geographical field of study. So if you try to take these three questions on the face value, it will be that all the questions have got same set of answers. So how we need to proceed, if I have selected both the questions in my answer writing, the segregation that is desired to convince examiner to give me marks. So that becomes challenging. But as I have always maintained, selective approach of preparation, simple question oriented preparation is no longer valid for our examination. There has been re-establishment of certain elementary textbooks for our preparation strategies that is very well justified, and as I proceed one by one with the question, I'll be giving you the specifications of these questions or specification of references that is required. It is maintained, however, degree of difficulty have reduced, no denial to it, but it is maintained. Understanding of entire content is only the requirement for us to be in comfort level to solve out this question paper. It cannot go with selective nature of preparation strategies. So question 1 part A was landscape. It is 10 marker question, so the scope of enlargement remains less. Landscape is function of structure, process and state. Critic of the statement. You have to take a critical view of the statement. So I am in first part of the answer, I am straightforward taking the account of Davidian ideology. When I am putting on the analysis of landscape as function of structure, stage and process, I am straightforward taking Davidian viewpoint, the viewpoint that has been followed for almost all exogenic analysis in geography. What is this approach talking about? 10 marker question, very briefly. What is meant by structure? What is meant by process? What is meant by stages? Stages require slight enlargement. Question is not asking me to write explain. Question is asking me to write critically examine. I have to present a critique to this ideology. So what should be the addition apart from this? Brief account of them. There are two ways you can write, but let me first start the second dimension to it. What will be the second step of the answer for me to write? On what ground we criticize Davidian normal cycle of erosion? On what ground Davidian geomorphic cycle is criticized? The term that has been given criticism is cycle. Reason being, we need to take rejuvenation into account. So let me write that term. It's a dynamic equilibrium. And who is the propounder of the approach of dynamic equilibrium? 10 marker question, maximum 150 words. What I am supposed to write in this particular answer, part 1 of the answer, I must talk about what is Davidian viewpoint of landscape as function of structure, stage and process. And then part 2, why this approach in spite of the fact that we are even today following it. Criticism came in the reference of 68 plate tectonic theory. We are even today following it. But then what is the point of criticism that is there? Why it is restricted? It do not give recognition to rejuvenation. Dynamic equilibrium says all. Whether I take it in reference to tectonic or I take it in reference to use static, I have got the possibility to add it to it. So 10 marker question, 2 dimension answer. I think it's a throwaway marks question. One of the most focused part when we prepare for our geomorphology. And if you have gone through, I uploaded that video also earlier before we started with our test series program, that because for the last few years, there has been a continuous, last few years, 2014 onwards, there has been continuous emphasis on endogenic forces. I already said that there will be the focus on exogenic forces in our geomorphic question, because it is difficult for us to ignore geomorphology and climatology when it comes to the study of or the question paper, as they are the core segments of our syllabus. So it is Davissian ideology, straightforward approach, no difficulty for us to write. Only being cautious about second part of the question is not missed out. Some of the students have missed out second part of the question. They have simply written landscape as function of structure, stage and process. Okay, part B reads, explain the role of evaporation in hydrological cycle. Now, slight twist is there in this particular question. It is saying role of evaporation. It's not a typical question. What is hydrological cycle? So the focus of the question is the role of evaporation in the hydrological cycle. I can start my answer with water cycle. I can identify water cycle incorporating all the realms of our environment, including biosphere, as 1, 2, 3 lines of the introduction. But the focus of the answer has to be on evaporation. So what you need to emphasize on? Potential, actual, transpirations. Reason being, evaporation is a continuous process. Its rate varies. Determiners of rate of evaporation includes prevailing atmospheric temperature and humidity levels. So when we take the combination of these two, what comes into account? Actual loss and potential loss. Potential loss that can be projected in the light of, projected loss that can be outlined in the light of wind movement. My air column was moist, because of wind it is advected, so there is again gap or the variations in the amount of moisture available and the rate of evaporation gets enlarged. So I have to first talk about this. And second very important thing, so first thing I have said, write a brief note on what is hydrological cycle. Second, the main part of the answer, evaporation rate determined by two factors which are substantially variable, and that variation has to be kept in account to write about potential and actual evapotranspiration. When should I conclude and how should I conclude this particular short length answer? I should conclude it, role of evaporation in hydrological cycle. Atmospheric hydrological cycle. What I am talking about? Some amount of moisture gets evaporated, adiabatic warming, before actually reaching the surface, and thus is creating additional dimension of what we climatologists believe in of hydrological cycle. If role of evaporation in hydrological cycle is to be addressed, these 3 points suffices the answer. If you are only writing answer on what is hydrological cycle, it's only one part of the 3 part that is desired that you have written. You can easily understand what will be the scope. Hydrological cycle stands for what? Evaporation to be focused, so 2 has to be added. Evaporation, very technical, conventional thing, varies in accordance to variations in temperature and varies in accordance to the humidity level, and because we have precipitation at variable base level of the cloud and surface temperature, there is adiabatic warming and the influence on the falling precipitation that generates what? Atmospheric hydrological cycle. Answer becomes complete. Question number 1, part C, describe the causes and consequences of sea level changes. Which IPCC's working group is being highlighted in this question? IPCC with its third assessment report was organized into 3 working groups. We called Which working group? Sea level changes, causes, consequences. Both are asked. Answer easily can be divided into causes 1 and consequences 2. Or I can interweave. This cause is leading to this consequence. Better it is that I am combining causes part 1 and consequences as part 2. My question is still waiting to be answered. Which working group? Working group 2. Working group 1 analyzes what is the natural conditions or natural scenario. That is the reason working group 1 includes scholars. Working group 2 talks about impact, and working group 3 talks about mitigation and adaptation strategies. This particular question is asking you to talk about impact. So what are the causes for sea level changes? IPCC has to be kept in brain, otherwise answer will go absolutely out of track. That is the reason I have mentioned IPCC. Keeping in mind the 5th assessment report, working group 2. What are the causes of sea level changes? Causes of sea level changes, umbrella expression can be applied, and that can be easily related to what? Changing climate. But I can be more specific. Climate sensitivity. .9 meters of rise in mean sea level by 2100, primarily due to thermal expansion, because 80% of heat added to the climate system by human activity is absorbed by oceans. So prime reason for sea level changes has to do with thermal expansion. The other reasons can be ablation, higher amount of discharge in the surface runoff. Another reason can be unprecedented variations in the precipitation pattern. You can combine them together into one category, changing climate. So when I talk about what are the causes of sea level changes, causes of sea level changes can be nutshell divided into two. Number 1, thermal expansion, and number 2, changing weather conditions, changing climatic conditions. I am talking about all. Global warming as well as global dimming. Second part of the question says consequences. So consequences can readily be applied into two categories. Sea level will be related to two defined categories of consequences. What will be that? Weather mechanism. And habitability. It says what? What is weather mechanism? Immense low pressure developed in Arabian Sea. What is normal? During this season, which marginal water body of our country should experience immense, intense low pressure? It should be Bay of Bengal. But for last 2 years, which is the marginal water body that is actually experiencing it? Arabian Sea. And IMD have finally identified it to have evolved as a severe cyclonic storm. That means it is going to be a super cyclone, technically hurricane. If I take the account of it, I am talking about what? Extreme weather mechanism. Unprecedented low pressure, intensity, frequency, duration of all the weather mechanism that is directly or indirectly related to water bodies. Cyclonic surges and sea storms are very important examples there. And what do I include in habitability? Landfall of cyclone will influence coastal areas, thus habitability of humans. And such extreme warming up of the water, thermal expansion, increased weather vagaries that has got its source in the water bodies, by default is going to influence photic habitat, both planktonic and nectonic acids. So you can subdivide it thereby. One human to the other organisms, and it defines the categories of the answer. So what are the causes of sea level changes? Causes of sea level changes is 1, thermal expansion, 2, it is with the changes that we are experiencing in climate, and it's a feedback system. What is consequence of change of the climate? It's again that weather vagaries are multiplying and habitability is on decrease. These dimensions, of course, briefly 10 marker question it is justified. I have been a consistent maintainer of this idea that in our optional, answer writing must reflect my understanding of the content. And that is the reason interwoven content of the any topic, it is interwoven, it is something that is hidden within. I need to elaborate and specify. Elaboration is, of course, I have got space limit, I cannot elaborate beyond certain point. Elaboration is specify. I must not write answer with interwoven characteristic, I must specify. These are the points that I am taking into account. Repetitive errors must be minimized. So mental construct and thereby writing where dimensions are given prominence, you are automatically convincing examiner, because you have actually moved beyond textbook. You have integrated many things together, because all the questions are quite open-ended. We very commonly use the term dynamic questions for them. And dynamic questions requires which kind of orientation? I need to think on my own terms, as in which are the things that I have learned while preparing for my optional can be included in its writing. And more rationally you are putting it, you are convincing examiner of your understanding level. That is what is required. Question number 1, part D, distinguish between intrazonal and azonal soil. First part of the question, describe in brief the characteristics and importance of azonal soil. It is intrazonal and azonal. Interestingly, zonal is not asked. We geographers classify soil into 3 categories: zonal, intrazonal and azonal. First part of the question says distinguish between intrazonal and azonal. What I am doing is, azonal type of soil do includes montane soil. But to begin with, because I have to distinguish, I am keeping aside montane for a while and reading azonal soil to be representing gradational soil. As soon, because dominantly it is represented by gradational soil. And what are intrazonal soil? Intrazonal soil is either climate, relief or structure regulated. So let me write the categories. Now it becomes easy. First part of the question says distinguish between intrazonal and azonal soil. I do agree, I have hidden one of the types of azonal soil, but that is rational. How it is rational, I'll just prove it. So my azonal soil is gradational soil and my intrazonal soil is a structural category of the soil, is equal to first point of distinction will be that intrazonal soil have got well-defined soil horizons. It will have a defined soil profile. In azonal will not have it. Azonal will be more mineral rich, genetic horizon less soil. So first point of difference has evolved. Second point of difference automatically comes up in the cascading go. If I am talking about soil horizon with genetic D, C, B and A, and I am not having that genetic horizon, by default as geographers, intrazonal soil will have more localized existence compared to azonal soil. Azonal soil will be represented with more indefined kind of location. They are present everywhere. And what do we apply with intrazonal soil? Something specified as structure, Rego red xena, something specified as relief or morphology, that is where we apply helomorphic and hydromorphic soils. So we take more specification of the location. These 2 points of distinction can be enlarged further, as I have already said. One is not with genetic horizons, 2 is with the genetic horizon, 1 is more universal in its presence, 2 is more localized in its presence. I can continue in the cascading go, but I think it is better that it is interwoven with 1. This is more with mineral resources. This is absolutely in the fertile category. This incorporate restricted mineral resources and have got variable levels of fertility. Because calomorphic is called fertile, helomorphic and hydromorphic are infertile soil. So I can demarcate the distinction. And then the second part of the question is asking about azonal soil. Yes. Describe in brief the characteristics and importance of azonal soil. So azonal soil is gradational soil. Gradational soil is glacial soil. Gradational soil is loess, gradational soil is alluvial. I don't need to tell you which soil has to be emphasized when you are talking about brief characteristics. And while you are talking about brief characteristics, importance automatically comes in. Most fertile. Glacial soil is fertile but waterlogged, unfavorable location when it comes to cultivation. Loess soil is fertile but is largely devoid of recognizable amount of humus. And because loess is considered to be that fine texture, argillaceous, that it is thousands of years of continuous deposition will facilitate its development, so its availability is very restricted. On the map of world, we have recognizable loess only at 3 locations: loess, limon and ado. So automatically alluvial becomes prominent. While writing characteristics, you can easily weave importance. Alluvial soil predominantly utilized for principal grain. Principal grain. We don't cultivate wheat in alluvial soil, will be wrong, but we cultivate rice more prominently in this. We do cultivate wheat. That is the reason I said principal grain. And principal grain by default is soil exhaustive crops. So importance gets justified. As I read question 1 part E, this is something as a new evolving trend in our question paper. You must have noticed, if you are noticing the question paper trend specifically since 2016. Earlier we used to have that overlapping topics as monsoons. Indian climate is par excellent example of monsoonal climate. An examiner in paper 2 is giving me to write about monsoonal mechanism. So I can understand what is the relevance of the question, because I do need to understand mechanism of monsoon before talking about monsoonal precipitation pattern in the country. But what we are noticing since 2016, that in paper 1 we are being asked to write answer in context of India. And that is what we are getting in this part E. Because otherwise we say paper 1 is world geography. India is included in world, no one is denying it. But my examples in paper 1 should not be India centric. Because then I am not approaching the answer systematic, which is the requirement of paper 1. I am approaching my answer as regional, which is not the approach of paper 1. But when the question is specifying, then I have to approach it from that perspective. So part E read, explain the natural and anthropogenic causes and mitigation measures of frequent flooding in Mumbai. I keep aside Mumbai for a while, and the question is natural and anthropogenic causes and consequences. Again, there are 2 terms to the question for us to apply. Causes of flood, consequences of flood have got the combination of natural and anthropogenic factors worldwide. This particular question is about Mumbai, because for last few years flooding of Mumbai, floating local train images have been very commonly applied. And in that perspective, when we talk about what are the causes of Mumbai floods as natural, without any doubt it is precipitation pattern. But is it actually that natural precipitation intensity and magnitude that is leading to Mumbai floods? Answer will be no. It is that unprecedented amount of precipitation, unprecedented amount and concentration of precipitation that has to have its link with anthropogenic factors. What I am trying to advise thereby, question is saying anthropogenic and natural causes and consequences of Mumbai floods, and then mitigation. So causes and consequences, natural and anthropogenic, should be interwoven, and interwoven with not hiding any factor. Mumbai, which is par moist climatic location, Mumbai, which is identified with average annual amount of precipitation of 125 to 130 centimeters, is predominantly experiencing precipitation during advancing monsoonal season. For the last few years, concentration of advancing monsoonal precipitation in this mega city of our country have been immensely increased. And this increase is not just spatial, this increase is in terms of time also. So it is in place of well distributed for approximately 3 months. It is now majorly confined to 15 to 20 days, with the coastal belt experiencing the massive downpour. Now what are the causes for it? The cause without any doubt is human induced modification to the climate system. We are not denying that. But when it is natural with human, causes and consequences, then I need to understand that flooding of Mumbai is not just with unprecedented rain. Flooding of Mumbai is because of absence of civic infrastructure at par to facilitate ready discharge of downpoured water. It is also the absence of maintenance. Paper 2, we have got 3 questions on water resources. Water related prominence is there in our country because it is water resource mitigation that is considered to be the prominent reference, apart from of course energy security in the country, which will take the course of our development on more dependable and sustainable lines. So we need to take water resources quite more seriously. Now when I talk about causes and consequences in the continuity, what I am advising, natural and anthropogenic factors combined together. First thing, cause is unprecedented downpour in smaller area and shorter time. Area is specified so I can avoid emphasizing it. And what is the reason that flooding is taking place is not just because of precipitation, it is because of absence of updation of civic infrastructure in requirement to the growing demand. So this is second thing that you are writing. Consequences without any doubt will be correlated to not just the immediate problem of challenges in regards to commuting. There are different types of mishaps that takes place in comparatively short-term perspective, containment of waterborne diseases in long-time perspective, restoring the infrastructure that has been depleted or have subjected to any sort of depletion or distortion because of the waterlogged condition. So consequences can be demarcated into 3 class categories, time based because they are interwoven. I cannot make them segregated altogether. So if natural and anthropogenic causes are taken into account, I have taken 2 factors for this answer: rainfall amount, intensity, and civic infrastructure. And actually this civic infrastructure is what we are taking in consequence, and in the consequences what we are taking, temporal demarcation we are taking. Immediate, write it as short term, mid term and long term consequences. What is the reference that we apply here? Civic infrastructure, I have just used the term distorted, depleted, etc. Short term, mitigating, correcting whatsoever anomalies are there. Mid-term, restricting the outbreak of waterborne diseases. Long-term, not just re-establishing civic infrastructure, but flood and flooding also incorporate its massive impact on Mumbai. Do not go very strongly with habitat if I take it very superficial, but if I try to enhance it, Mumbai do comes up in CRZ. Coastal regulation zone, mangroves for future. Such contaminated logged water by default will have its influence on habitat as well. So in effect to Mumbai, I can specify the answer like this. Question also asked me to write about mitigation. So we know that again IPCC, because we are talking about climate change, IPCC has made the observation that all the changes that we have induced to the climate system is irreversible. That means whatsoever changes are done, they are not going to get reverted back. So only thing that is there in our hand is to mitigate and adapt. Mitigation strategy is not repeating the same mistake, and adaptation is to adapt to the changing condition. Question is asking me to write about mitigation strategies. So mitigation strategies by default is long-term perspective. Mumbai is mega most city of our country. Population is 18 million plus, though we say it is 1 million plus, that is mega city. There is mitigation strategy of upgrading. I am not using the term updating, I am using the term upgrading civic infrastructure. Because change of the climate and resultant precipitation is out of our control. What can be in our control is minimizing the problems evolving due to this downpour. So it is upgrading the civic infrastructure in accordance, and it should be long-term perspective, not for tomorrow, 20 years, 25 years down the line, so that we are in the position of subsuming that surplus population which has evolved in the city. So part 1 of the question, don't divide, natural and human right together, causes. Part 2 of the question, consequences. And part 3, mitigation, has to do with enhancing the civic infrastructure to adjust, to incorporate that excessive population cluster that Mumbai is correlated with. That is how we can apply the answer framework. Specified as Mumbai, so spatial dimension gets restricted, otherwise the content matter can be the same even if Mumbai would not have been written. And what are the natural and anthropogenic causes and consequences and mitigation strategies of flood, then I could pinpoint at some examples as space. Here examiner has given me specification of the location. You can cite example of Mumbai floods of the last 2 years with which I started the answer. I am with question 2 now. Evaluate how far Kober's geosynclinal theory explains mountain building process. 20 marker question. Kober's geosynclinal theory explaining mountain building process, how far it is successful, is the key term of the question. What is the best way this answer can be written is that you are writing Kober's geosynclinal concept. Kober gave recognition to all the types of geosyncline which we geographers believe in. So I can start my answer with a single line definition of what is meant by geosyncline. And I've said single line definition because Kober is recognizing all the types of geosyncline. What is this all the types of geosyncline? Temporal category, locational category, process based category, structure based category. So you can add another line which is talking about the Mesozoic geosyncline, land front or waterfront geosyncline, the poly or mono geosyncline, EU and Meo geosyncline. EU is with igneous stratas also. I have taken second line introduction, 30-40 words are gone with this. I have talked about what are geosyncline and the types that we geographers recognize. Now the question is asking me to attempt how far Kober has been successful in giving the mountain building concept. So Kober's analysis of 3 stages of development of mountain building, without any doubt fold mountain. Lithogenesis, brief details, orogenesis, brief details, and glyptogenesis. Again brief details. You have written the concept of Kober because when you have to analyze a concept you must give examiner ultimately what the concept was oriented towards. So I have written geosyncline, Kober's concept on geosyncline which is related to 3 stages of the formation. Kober's approach by itself is too descriptive. Question is asking me to write about how far he has been successful. Answer to this question is only because of the key name to be added here, Arthur Holmes' convective magma currents, that this descriptive theory have been given a rational preceder status to plate tectonic theory in the explanation of orogenesis. So how far Kober has been successful reaching this level, I'll say Kober's approach of mountain building is largely descriptive in nature. What makes shallow sinking seabed actually sink to become narrow and deep? He is not giving us any rational description to it. It is with Arthur Holmes that we talk about convective magma cells, which is generating the deepening of the geosyncline or eventually the compressional stress. So first part of the answer, define geosyncline. Second part, be very clear, Kober's analysis minus Arthur Holmes. Third part, how far it has been successful with Arthur Holmes' convective magma cells concept integrated to this descriptive concept. It is favorable in explaining certain categories of young fold mountains. Which categories of young fold mountains? Those which are with land front. I cannot give recognition to Kober's concept for block mountains, it is by default there. Fold mountains, chronological demarcation is not specified. So this concept is absolutely silent when it comes to old fold mountain. Young fold cordilleras are 4, Western, Andean, Alpine and Himalayas, and I get explanation for alpine and Himalayas only, because the concept talks about two stable masses with lithogenesis and glyptogenesis. So how far it has been successful? It has been successful in explaining some categories. Which are these categories? In my introduction it has already come. Land front geosyncline of young fold mountain, not all the mountains and certainly not all the fold mountain, and why it has been successful to that magnitude, that it is a rational preceder of plate tectonic theory, Arthur Holmes' convective analysis. So you must give examiner the descriptive nature that Kober's concept is correlated, because Kober was the first scholar to have utilized geosyncline. Hollandana were exploring Appalachian orogeny in giving us the term geosyncline, but then the first mountain building concept on the developed geosyncline is related to Kober, but the concept was descriptive in nature. So how far it is applicable? Young fold mountains, and that too because Arthur Holmes is active. Part B, critically examine the basis and scheme of climatic classification proposed by Glenn Trivartha. Which category of classification Trivartha has proposed? Which category we put this classification in? It's empirical. Empirical category of climatic classification takes into account two most measured elements of weather and climate, temperature and precipitation in absolute value. See, I have already answered first part of the question. I am rereading first part of the question. Basis. Critically examine the basis and scheme of climatic classification. Basis is what I am talking about. What is the basis of Trivartha's classification scheme? Basis is empirical, so absolute value of temperature plus precipitation. Now see that the second part, first term of the question says critical. So I have to examine it hand in hand. What is the classification scheme? It's empirical. Because it is empirical, it is taking two most measured elements of weather and climate to classify, understood? These two are taken in absolute value, that is also convinced. Why it is that this is not taken to be a rational or a complete orientation of classification. Yes. Why it is so that we identify Thornwaite's classification to be practically more significant than even Köppen's classification. Köppen's classification is also into the category of empirical, because precipitation efficiency and temperature effectiveness actually determines the prevailing climatic condition. It's not the absolute value. So first part of the answer should not be given more than 30 to 40 words of writing. Being empirical category of classification, it has got these two bases. Why it is not considered to be an absolute relevant kind of classification? Because climatic conditions are not the outcome of absolute value, but relative value of these two elements. You can talk about effectivity and efficiency individually. Then the second part of the question, and what was the second part of the question reading? It reads scheme of climatic classification scheme. So what is the best way to write it? A type, B type, C type, D type, E type and F types of climate. There is no montane climate for Glenn Trivartha. A is tropical. I don't think I need to write all the subcategories. How many subcategories are there for A type of climate? A is rethink, tropical climate, and how many subcategories are being applied? AR and AW only. Tropical rainy, equatorial, and tropical monsoonal and savanna combined. You have to take the brief details of it. How do I write about climatic regions? Location and characteristics. I have to be brief. I have to write about all the climatic classification scheme. That is the reason I said first part of the answer should not be more than 30-40 words. So Equatorial, 10 degrees north to south, maritime equatorial air mass, absolute instability, throughout the year precipitation, equinoxes, rainfall maximum. Done. That is how you should write. How many B types of climate? 2. BW and BS. How many C type of climate? 2. CS, CFW. Symbol that has been elaborated or improved by Trivaltha. Because China type of climate, if is written as subtropical dry winters, it do not give me possibility to give recognition to Arctic frontal precipitation. So that is the reason we say this alphabetical symbol is better. D type of climate has DO and DC. E type of climate is only taiga, and F type of climate is 2. Ice cap and tundra. What is the categories, where are they, and what are their characteristics? So 2-3 lines each. Location must not be missed. Geography is essentially location, so location cannot be missed out in answer. Okay, throwaway marks question. Hardly anything that was difficult. Part C. Discuss the objectives and principles of environment education. Part 2 reads, describe the basic concerns of formal and non-formal environment education in India. I am attempting key terms on the whiteboard. This is what I said with our earlier question also. First time we are noticing that overemphasis of India specific questions in paper 1. Trend has been started 2016 onwards, but it is not that prominent as has been there in the yesterday's paper. So what are the key terms? Firstly, environment education. There are 2 terms written in first part of the question which reads objectives and principles. Objectives and principles can be taken in coherent manner. Principles of environmental education is serving certain objective. So I can easily interweave it. What are the principles of environmental education? I am adding second part of the question, I am rereading it. Describe the basic concerns of formal and non-formal environment education in India. Answer is constructed. Even if it is written as India, I can take the account of Indian specific examples. Like I can talk about INCCA or NAPCC, but the format of answer writing will be the same. What is the principles and objectives of environment education? Like any other component of the study in geography, environment education have also evolved of its dimension of working. And that evolution is demarcated with 3 defined orientations. Pre-United Nations Conference on Human Environment, Stockholm Conference. The environment education was simply oriented towards awareness. We call them classical, principal classical phase of environment education. What was the objective of this phase? Creating awareness. What is my environment? My environment is my surrounding. I should be aware of what is my surrounding is comprised of, simply creating awareness. Stockholm Conference 1972, United Nations Conference on Human Environment, modified the nature of environment education. So objective and principle got added. Awareness continued. We started taking the concerns to our domain. What is meant by concerns to our domain? Something wrong is going to the environment. We are doing something wrong to the environment. We are ignorant about the environmental conditions, and thus we are now feeling the heat. I'm in 70s. Environmental challenges were not that great that time. And then when I take Earth Summit 1992, United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, I'm talking about beginning of action. So awareness I need to be. Why IPCC is divided into 3 working groups? Because until and unless I am aware of this is normal, I cannot judge how abnormal it has become. So working group 1 gives us understanding of what should be normal in a given condition, in a given point of time. So we try to understand awareness, normal condition. It is what are the changes that we have induced and what should we do to overcome those changes. This is action taken where Indian context, that is second part of the question, can be integrated. Indian environmental education, global environmental education as action taken is incorporating formal and non-formal category. What is non-formal category? Traditional ecological knowledge. Traditional forest dwellers, grassroots people, generations dependent on natural setup have never ever induced. They are dependent on natural setting precisely for their absolute existence, and that too for generations. But they have not induced any sort of what we call negative outcome or negative imprint on environment. So when we talk about non-formal approaches, we simply take traditional ecological knowledge. 2004 CBD have formally integrated program of work on TEK into non-formal action. And what is the formal action? Because it is asked in Indian context. So what are the climate change mitigation, environmental sustainability clauses that we are following in our country? In our country, because it is specifically read as India, so I can easily talk about Indian Network on Climate Change Assessment and National Action Plan on Climate Change. Environment Protection Act 1986. This is formal. TEK is non-formal or informal category. If it would have been in global context, not India, not specified, then in place of INCCA and NAPCC, what would have taken the, it's not about this answer, adding something. If in place of India, it would have been global perspective. So in place of this, what should be the point for us to write? And then the tail enders. UNFCCC is umbrella, Kyoto Protocol, second commitment period, Paris Accord, yes or no, and second by default will be Montreal Protocol. CBD is umbrella, but there are secondary CITES, CMS, yes or no? So global. But because the question is asking India, so I'll talk about INCCA and NAPCC. Brief, very brief, because I have to talk about all of them. TEK has to be given its recognition, and we need to take the account. TEK will go with what? Forest Rights Act in Indian context. I am rereading the question before I go to the next question. Discuss the objectives and principles of environmental education and describe the basic concerns of formal and non-formal environmental education in India. Now comes question number 3. Explain throwaway marks question. Explain the origin, progress and retreat of Indian monsoons and discuss its impact on Indian economy. I keep second part of the question aside. 3 terms are there. I hope I can remove, earlier I removed it faster. Now we are talking about, first part of the question is very conventional type. I need to talk about 3 terms: origin, progress and retreat. My question is, I am reading the first part of the question again and coming up with a question. Explain the origin, progress and retreat of Indian monsoon. Should I write both the monsoons that we experience in the country, or our focus should be only on advancing monsoon? Why? Second part of the question reads, and discuss the impact on Indian economy. The term retreat is written, should not be misleading. I am writing answer on advancing monsoon. I hope you are understanding. What is the logic with which we are taking this advancing monsoon should be our focus and not retreating monsoon? Because retreating monsoon is nothing but re-establishment of headley cell. Origin and progress will be is equal to modified headley cell. So first part divided into three terms. Origin, headley cell getting modified. So you have to talk about all the concepts that we learn when we learn about monsoonal mechanism very briefly. And that is the reason I am insisting origin should focus only on modified headley cell. Modified headley cell is equal to, I have given recognition to all. I have given recognition to ITCZ concept, I have given recognition to thermal concept, I have also given recognition to subtropical jet paving way to tropical easterly jet, because I cannot elaborate. So origin you are talking about what? Mechanism. So here you are writing mechanism of monsoon. Progress, Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea branches. Yes, all of us? Retreat. Retreat. IMD says advancing monsoonal season begins from 15th June and continues till 15th September. 15th September, fast forward few days. Stand synonym to. I know equinox. Which equinox? Autumn equinox. Autumn equinox, thermal equator overlapping, moving south of geographical equator. What will happen? Continental most part of the country, Satluj Yamuna plain, will readily become high pressure. Retreat will begin. What is retreat? Retreat is re-establishment of headley cell. And what is the impact of monsoon? NCERT. NCERT gives you 3 pages. Impact of monsoons on Indian economy. Which are the aspects that can be written here? Because we talk about our, not getting to the details, simple thing, 69% of the total population of our country, 2011 census, still is in rural area. And as economic geographers, rural areas are related with which type of activity? Agriculture. Our agriculture is which type of agriculture? Crop culture. And our crop culture, 65% of cultivated area in the country is rain fed. 70% of annual rain comes in advancing monsoon. So main focus of answer has to be agriculture, and agriculture dependable, so agro based industry, agricultural dependency increase, so farm income increasing, so market will be sustained. Ultimately I am talking about 69% of the population. So you can relate it there. So relation is, question has been asked in examination, I am using that term, forward and backward link. Agriculture